According to the USA Census in 2021, 1 in 4 American adults are descended from Ireland, and many of us Americans love to show off our Irish pride, especially this time of the year. But what if what we think is Irish actually isn't? I wanted to know, what is true Irish fashion or clothing? What foods do they actually eat for St. Patrick's Day? Is shamrock green actually the color that they would wear? Do they wear kilts? What did they wear? In the 16th century, during the reign of good old Henry VIII and his daughter Elizabeth, there is a lot of good insight as to what they actually did wear. In part 1, we will go over the colors, saffron, and introduce the Lena, as well as making our own clothes like the curdle, talk about the moy and Shenron gown, and so forth. To start out with, green. Green is associated with luck and symbolizes Irish nationalism, as well as represents the Emerald Isle. You might be wondering about the color orange. Well, the color orange is for the Orangemen of Northern Ireland, who are in an Irish Protestant political society. So then, what is the original color truly associated with the Irish? Introducing saffron yellow. Saffron is a spice native to the Middle East. Through trade, it made its way to Europe. Saffron is one of the only natural dyes that linen actually takes well. The color it makes is a brilliant, almost fluorescent color yellow. Saffron has to be harvested by hand, contributing to part of the expensiveness of it. Since saffron is very expensive, did the Irish actually use it to dye their fabrics? The short answer is yes. They did also use other methods to dye their garments yellow, but nothing could compare or be more prized than using actual saffron to dye their garments. Even if an Irish man or woman only owned one of these garments, so prized was it that they wouldn't even wash it so it wouldn't fade. Now to introduce one of the most influential painters of the 16th century, who gave us a lot of the ideas of what Irish men and women actually wore during that time. In his watercolor paintings, you can see the brats or mantles, lenas for men and women, curdles, the different kind of hats they wore as well. Let us first start with the Lena. In this picture, you'll see for both the men and the women the bagpipe sleeves, but the sleeves are gathered, which would not have happened in the 16th century. They were often made out of linen. The other type of fabric they would have used, especially for the curdles, was wool. You would not find a Lena made out of wool, but definitely out of linen. I can't afford that, so I didn't use either. We decided to go ahead and use the shifts that we had used for our 19th century Little Woman production back in December. I had to take off the sleeves, and then underneath the sleeves, I had to create a triangular arm gusset. I also cut slits on the side and down the middle to create more longer triangular gussets, and I had to take off the lace. Here are all the sleeves cut off of our 3 shifts. Here I'm showing how much longer I want to make our Lenas, and here's one I have started working on. I've created the slits, and I'm measuring out the length that I actually want to add onto this. This was very time consuming, and it would have been a lot easier just to make it completely from scratch, but I'm trying to save money and save on fabric and not waste and use what I have. I really like to use sheet sets. I can find them pretty cheap on Amazon, which I'll have linked below. But obviously the best thing would have been if we could have afforded it to use actual linen fabric to make this. Here I'm measuring out the bagpipe sleeves. I wasn't entirely sure how big to make these, and there isn't exactly a measurement out there, but obviously they really liked a lot of excess fabric, so the bigger would be the richer that they were. But this is what I went with. I sewed these huge rectangles to the armbands of the shift first, and then whatever was left over, I sewed those together down, making basically, a one big rectangle. Now it was time to make the curdles. These probably would have been wool, but I made ours out of flannel. Here you can see where Dahir had put more of an English type kerchief at the top, but he didn't add those later, and the Irish would not have actually worn those. That was more in rebellion, and they didn't want to be quite English, which made them more despised, unfortunately. He did show that they had kind of like a scarf as well. This is the pattern that I'm using or modifying, trying to get eventually what is in the picture. We did our best, and this was the best that we could come up with. It was more of a guideline though. Here I'm comparing the pink gown to the Shenron gown and how the sleeves are basically just kind of like bands instead of what's in the pattern. You'll also see that the neckline would have been extremely low on the Shenron gown, and I tried to lower that when I made the pink gown, but I didn't make it quite as low as the actual Shenron gown would have been. They might have had two curdles, one that was no sleeves, one with sleeves. In this situation, I decided to combine both ideas, and I made a reversible curdle, with one side being with the long armbands that go down. But if you flipped it the other way, you could tuck the armbands or arm sleeves in, and you would have a different color no sleeve curdle. I used both patterns from both types of dresses and combine them together starting at the waist area, and then that way I could use the armbands better, and I lowered the neckline just a bit to show off the Lena underneath better as well. I also did not do any of the darts in these patterns. My older three girls were such troopers in hand sewing these long dresses. We made one side one color, and then I ended up putting both the top and the bottom piece together to make the underside cover using the sheets that I had purchased as well. Here you can see the two layers, and this is all I had of the flannel, and I realized this and I didn't have any armbands, so I decided to just take whatever was left in between the two sides of the dress and use that to make the armbands. Thankfully, I didn't need full sleeves for what I was going to do, even though in that picture they did have full sleeves for my dress. This is the skirt that you would wear underneath. This could have been another curdle again, but in this case, I decided to just make a separate skirt. I used the leftover, and anything that looked like that I sewed together, cut across to make the waist, and gathered it enough to fit me, and then did some side strings to sew together. Now the Shenron gown. There are a couple sources that talk about the Shenron gown. One of those is the Saffron Cloth WordPress website, where I got this from. It talks about where they found it, and much like the Moy gown, it was found in a bog and named for that area. Now for my rendition of trying to make this gown, I used the same pattern I used for the other curdles, but I tried to lower the neckline, and I should have lowered it even more and made the waistline even higher than what I did. I also realized that 4 yards of fabric just wasn't quite enough, and so even though I used the pattern pieces for the bodice, I realized that I needed just enough for the sleeves and used every bit of the rest to make the pleated skirt all in one, like one big rectangle together. So here I'm measuring the sleeve, partial sleeves that will go down, and had just enough from there to use the rest of it to make the skirt. Here I'm showing that I took the two sides of this dress and I put the right sides together, and then I sewed the whole top, neckband, the back, and the sides, and then I skipped the armholes and then sewed down both sides of the dresses. I did not do anything with the bottom, that way I could flip it out from the bottom. I also did not hem any of these dresses because they would not have hemmed them. That way I could have two different dresses by just flipping them around. Now time for the dreaded moy gown. Just like the Shenron gown, the moy gown was named after the area it was found. Cass McGain on Reconstructing History tells a lot of the story, as do other sources. To me, it looked like it was basically two rectangles and a lot of triangular gussets that made up this gown. This is my daughter Julie, and she is the model for it, and so I just kind of took all the measurements after her, trying to fit it to her as best as I could. So here you see the two triangles, that's the front and the back. Not triangles, rectangles. Those are the triangles. And those are going to fit in to make the skirt wide and look more like a skirt, whereas the top will be more fitted. I'm sure it would have been a lot easier if I had just bought the pattern, but instead I wanted to challenge myself on a very challenging dress and kept looking at the pictures that I found online and tried to draft my own pattern. I ended up taking those sleeves and throwing them out and completely remaking them with a big rectangle. I did use those little triangles though to put as gussets, but the rest of that big huge thing I got rid of. Okay, so these sleeves I think I've got figured out, maybe.
Mom.
Okay, so I made one big rectangle, and I kept this, square here, trapezoid, and I have it sewed as the shoulder area. So this is the front of the garment, top over the shoulder. Here's your back. This is all rectangular. Then I've had it sewed at the gusset at this place. Okay, and then this is gonna get sewed, and then this is gonna sew up to here, and then sewed down. Okay, I think we finally got the moy gown sleeves finished. Are you ready, girls? Ready? Ta-da! There she is. All right, she can move her arms up and down. Watch out, please. Okay, come closer. All right, so we laced it up, but we'll probably maybe add buttons. Okay, and then turn around, because technically the whole seam here and here would have buttons. Not sure about that, but you can see the V. I might make it slightly tighter somehow, I'm not sure, but I'm so excited we got the sleeves figured out. To sum up what King Henry VIII declared, no saffron-colored garments, nor garments with excessive yardage of fabric, for both clothes and head, nor brats or mantles are to be worn by either man, woman, or child. King Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I, unfortunately tried to continue her father's ruling and the control of Ireland. Those who wanted to earn her favor painted or talked about the Irish as wild and crazy. It is through Henry VIII's declarations and the painters and travelers who wanted to please their patroness, Queen Elizabeth I, like John Derrick, an English official who accompanied Sir Henry Sidney in Ireland, that we know what the Irish of that century did wear. Sadly, eventually the bright saffron yellow color did fade out, and the Irish adopted many of the English styles and fashion. What lasted the longest was the Irish brat to the skirt of the English and the men's trews or trousers. Now it is time for the brat or mantle. Well, that's it for part one. We hope that this was interesting to you as it was to us. There were so many things that I did not know as an American, and I am sure that I probably still got things wrong. I am not a historian nor a fashion historian, and so a lot of this was just kind of internet research. And also, Cass McGain has so much good information on this. I've read 3 of her books now. I'll have them linked below so you can get them for yourself. There's a lot for free online in Reconstructing History that she writes about as well. Next time, in part 2, we will continue this series, but bringing it up to a closer time period, like the 19th century. There we'll be learning about what is a Bridget. I have a daughter named Bridget, and she was interested to learn that it doesn't quite have the connotation of just a name, especially when it came to Irish domestic servants. We'll also talk about some of the foods that we've learned that they liked to prepare, especially more so in Ireland. If you have any thoughts, advice, things that you have learned, maybe things about your ancestors that came over from Ireland, or if you're from Ireland, we would love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.